Hello everybody. I'm obviously the token male on this call. Welcome to this, the first in a series of Sutton Means Business webinars, hosted by Successful Sutton, the Business Improvement District company for Central Sutton. Business Improvement District companies are set up by business ratepayers in a particular locality. They derive their funding and their very existence from those ratepayers. They exist in order to pool their resources, both financial and otherwise, to do things together which none of them could do on their own. I am chairman of Successful Sutton and a director of numerous other companies, both locally and otherwise. I am a commercial solicitor, albeit that I retired from practice a few years ago. I don't claim to be an expert on any of the topics with which we're concerned today. I've looked into most of them from the point of view of a client and user, rather like most of you. In my case, that of a businessman who happens to be a lawyer, rather than as an advisor. I believe very strongly in the wealth of resources we have in our community, and that this is a time to pool those resources for the benefit of all concerned. That is indeed the rationale behind bid companies such as Successful Sutton. As I mentioned, this is the first in a series, and I hope that all of them will prove helpful. We have assembled an excellent panel of expert speakers. I would like now to introduce Catherine Glass of White Label, who will introduce them and facilitate the remainder of this webinar. Catherine, over to you.
Thanks very much, Nick, and welcome to everyone that's joining us this afternoon. As Nick says, we hope in the next hour to be able to answer some of your questions that are very important to you in this current situation that we're all in. We're predominantly talking about how to keep our businesses financed, afloat, how to look after our staff, and as Nick says, we have a really strong panel here to talk to you. Before I introduce them to you, I just want to let you know how you can talk to us. It's really important that we make this as interactive as possible, so I'm relying on all of you to step up to the mark this afternoon and give us your questions so we can answer them. On your screen, you'll be able to do that in a number of ways. There is a button which you can use, the Q&A button, where you can post a question to us, and I will then pose that to the relevant panelist. There's also a chat bar which you can use to talk to us offline in a chattable way, and you can do that, and that will also appear on our screen. So if there's something that someone says that you disagree with or you want to comment on, then you can use either of those ways to talk to us. Very importantly, if you want to actually talk to us live today, you can do that as well. And there's a little button that you press, which is a virtual wave, and that will let me know that you're willing to come on, and not visually, but verbally, to ask your question in person. We really do want to hear from as many people as possible this morning. This afternoon. What's important about this session is that you do use it as an opportunity to answer some of your queries. Very conscious that a lot of the helplines are quite, snowed under with calls. So this would be a really good way of getting through and getting an immediate answer on something that maybe you need to know fairly urgently. So I'm going to introduce you now to our panellists. So we've got the Deputy Leader of Sutton Council, Councillor Jane McCoy. From the HR department, we've got Helen, well known to many people. And from accountancy firm Brian Johnson, we've got Jackie Wilding, who's going to be talking to you about any accountancy matters. You've already met Nick. Debbie O'Connell is a relationship manager for NatWest Bank, and she can talk to you specifically about queries relating to the CBILS, loans and other financial questions. And lastly, but very importantly, we have a face that hopefully many of you know in Sutton, and that's Patricia Park, who is the lead for the Successful Sutton bid. And really, business improvement districts at the moment are really vital for small businesses as a way of keeping you informed, keeping you connected. And it's fantastic that Successful Sutton are bringing this opportunity to the borough to enable you all to benefit from that. So what I'm going to do, first of all, just to give you all a chance to think about what questions you might like to ask, I'm going to ask them all to say a few words about what they see as being the priorities at the moment in their area of work. And first of all, I'm going to go to Deputy Leader, Councillor Jane McCoy. Over to you, Jane.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Thank you for allowing me to take part in this panel, which I hope will be very useful. The government has introduced a number of schemes, a vast number of schemes really, for businesses, which aim to help businesses affected by the coronavirus crisis, help them with their cash flow and with business continuity. And the council's been tasked with delivering the business rates relief and the business grants scheme. So we've been focusing very much on trying to get that out. But the council also has some additional schemes that it's offering. We're offering business rates, holidays for people. For our suppliers and contractors, we're being very flexible, trying to pay them sooner rather than later, maybe earlier than normal, being flexible about the contracts to try and help them. For any businesses and charitable organisations or voluntary organisations that are operating from premises that they rent from us, we're offering them rent holidays. And also we're suspending enforcement action against businesses at the moment for non-payment of bills, things like that. I think the most important thing, though, that I particularly want to get out of today is I want to hear from businesses where they're having problems accessing the schemes with government. We have links into MHCLG, to London councils, to ministers, and we've found that we've been feeding back already information from businesses about things they're having issues with or where they're not eligible for grants and schemes. We've been feeding that back and they have been listening, which is quite a nice change. You know, the self-employment scheme, they've now introduced schemes for larger businesses, and the future funds that's recently introduced for innovative and creative industries. This is all about a bit of collective lobbying, so it's really useful to have that information. If you're having any difficulties with those schemes, we can feed that through and hopefully try and get some changes for you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jane. And I'm sure some of you will have some further questions that Jane can either answer now or take back and talk to colleagues at the council and give you the answers that you need. I'm going to go to Jackie. Jackie, you're very much in the thick of it in terms of dealing with clients who are trying to presumably access all these different schemes. How important is it to have a good accountant right now?
Invaluable. The last 3 weeks have merged into oblivion, and there's no Saturdays or Sundays anymore because clients need support. They need their hands held. You know, everyone's really nervous. We don't know when it's going to end. They can't make decisions. So we've spent the last 3 weeks, all of us, talking to all our clients, holding their hands, getting them ready for the portal and the furloughing of staff, and just really helping them to make good informed decisions. So for me, cash is obviously king. So it's getting clients to look at their weekly, monthly and 6 monthly forecasting, looking at what their business could look like, and making some important strategic decisions for their business, because at the end of the day they need to all come out of this, because the SME world, of which we are all part of, is the lifeblood of our UK economy, and we have got to make sure we help all these clients. We're not even charging clients at the moment because they need our help. So that's the key for us.
I guess the key is that we are all in the middle of the storm at the moment, and we're all trying to do what we can to keep our businesses afloat. And there's many things we all need to do, but as part of that, we should also be taking some time to look at what the future might need to look like, and alongside that, managing our cash flow to ensure that we've got money in the bank to help us through. So I'm going to go to Debbie, talking of banks, money in the bank, loans. What's the biggest way that the local bank can help at the moment?
Hi, thanks, Catherine. So I'm a senior relationship manager at NatWest, and I look after about 100 SME clients. The biggest thing that I've been seeing at the moment, and over the last few weeks, like Jackie said, it's kind of merged into one, but there's been a real need for information, because a lot of people are clambering for information. A lot of people don't really understand the government schemes and what's available to them, and also the kind of information that they have to produce to actually get access to this money. I think there was a bit of a misconception at the beginning that, you know, it was virtually that you could walk into a bank and they would hand you whatever you wanted virtually, but it's quite a bit more complex than that, which people are having trouble getting to grips with. So the last few weeks have been spent, you know, providing information, helping customers with their applications, letting them know what kind of financial forecasts they need, and who to approach for them, like, you know, their accountant or FD if they're lucky enough to have one. So that's the kind of things we've been seeing. And then now we're starting to get the actual CBILS loan applications starting to come through, and being able to look at those and process those, which I'm happy to talk about if anyone's got any questions about those afterwards.
What is the expected timeline from start to finish when you apply for a CBILS loan, assuming that you have all the necessary documentation, which in itself I know is a task, but how quickly are they starting to bring money through on these now?
Yeah, we've had quite a few drawing, Croydon. In terms of timelines, I'd say once I've got all of the information that I need, so actually have everything, I would say probably within about 10 working days, you can have the money drawn into your account. It obviously depends on the amount of the loan, because the higher one's slightly more complex than the smaller ones. But within 10 working days, we're tending to get the money into customers' accounts.
Okay, and just one final thought for me on that. I mean, presumably the first port of call is to go to your own bank, but
Yes.
there are many other organisations now that are being given the rights to do these CBILS loans. So is it a question of shopping round? How does it work? What's the best route in?
Well, I can only speak for NatWest, but at the moment we're only prioritising our own customers, because, you know, we're, again, like Jackie, we're working from like 7 a.m. till 7 o'clock at night, and that's purely with our own customers, and it's only fair for us to prioritise them first of all. I mean, I have spoken to quite a few people from different banks. I'm happy to have a chat and give them advice. But in terms of actually providing the finance, they'll have to approach their own bank first of all.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Helen, I'm going to come to you. The job retention scheme went live yesterday. The portal went live. That and a whole myriad, I'm sure, of other HR issues are top of people's agenda at the moment. Talk to us a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So my company's the HR department, and as some of you already know, we help small and medium-sized businesses with their HR. Like others, Jackie and Debbie have already mentioned, we've been working from morning, noon and night to help our clients and many other small businesses kind of find their way through what's on offer. So in the beginning, we were talking a lot about laying off staff, then the furlough scheme, or the coronavirus job retention scheme, to give it its proper name, was brought in. And so we've been helping small businesses to make sure they get the right agreements in place for their employees, so that they can place their employees on furlough leave. And then looking at the guidance, which I think is on I think it's the 6th or maybe even the 7th update now, where we're getting drip-fed little bits of information. And I completely understand that HMRC are working equally as hard to get everything in place, and fair play for them to getting it up and running when they said they would. But it is very difficult, and we're helping those clients to work out what to do and who to furlough, who they're allowed to, what they're allowed to claim, what they aren't allowed to claim, what do they need to put into the system to be able to get their money, and when can they do it. And then the next thing that we'll be talking to clients about is the forward planning for what happens when either the scheme ends or you want to bring people back from furlough, or maybe even sadly have to make some redundancies. There's processes that need to be followed, so we need to have a think about those timescales. So very important in terms of finances that businesses are giving thought to that.
Okay, that's great. And I know that you are distributing on a very regular basis sort of the latest government advice. I think I have through my emails today actually a new document that you've produced, which sort of brings it all into one place. Is that right?
Yeah, we've got a coronavirus HR hub on our website, and that's got lots and lots of information on. So please, everybody, just go onto that website. Happy to send those details round. There's a Q&A, and there's some webinars to look at, and lots of information to keep up to date, a news page as well.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to come to Patricia. Patricia, as I said in my introduction, the role of business improvement districts has probably never been more important. And I know you're doing a sterling job, firstly bringing these webinars together, but also collating information through your website. Talk to us a little bit about how businesses can interact with you and what you're doing.
I think it's much the same way as they usually do. I think for us, as a bid, obviously our delivery for these businesses is the most important thing that we do at the moment. So without things like these webinars, without the survey and people feeding into that and giving us some guidance as to what they need, we don't really know where the delivery should go. So it's really good to have these sessions. And we are, we're hearing from businesses quite a lot around different issues that they're facing, a lot about some of the stuff we're talking about today, particularly around finances and furloughing at the moment. And as a lot of guys have already said, that because everything keeps changing daily, it's important that we're updating everything as much as possible through the website and sending stuff out through social media and so on. So there's a lot of different channels that people can follow. We'll be sending out a lot of information about where they can link in with me, particularly. And also, as I always say, my inbox is always open. So if anyone has any emails or needs to know anything or wants to make some links, then they can always just drop me a line whenever they want to, really.
The communication is definitely key in all of this, and we're all having to learn new ways to communicate.
Yes,
each other virtually. But it's great that actually through this has come out as a positive. I think and people are getting far better at communicating. And I know I've got a couple of questions which I'm going to go to already. But I think sharing experiences in this format is really valuable because you learn so much from what other people have learned or not done correctly and whatever. So I think just encourage you to all be, those of you that are watching, to be as interactive with our panel today. I've had a question from someone which I think is probably best answered by you, Jane, although I appreciate you'll probably be a little bit challenged around this, but it's just a lot on the subject that this particular person has emailed the business rates address at Sutton on the 9th of April. She had a confirmation back to say that was received within the hour. She's sort of checking every day to see if she's had any further response, and it's been 11 days. She's not heard back yet. Do you know what the sort of general turnaround time is? I'm sure they're inundated with inquiries. What is the expectation of how quickly she should hear back? Do you know?
I don't know what the turnaround time is. 11 days does seem a bit long to me, and I've not had any feedback from the team that they are inundated. I would ask the question was it a straightforward inquiry or was it a bit more complicated? Because it might be that if it's more complicated, they're trying to find the information. I've certainly not heard that they're inundated, and I would have expected a reply in sooner than 11 days based on that. I've taken down the name and I can follow that up if need be. But yeah, it might be if it's complicated, it's taken a bit longer.
Yeah, I think it's, I'd imagine everyone is pretty much, very busy trying to do all this. But I think that would be really helpful if you could go back and pick up on that. Now, we have just launched a poll that you should all be able to see on your screen now. It's asking how confident you're currently feeling about your business surviving amidst the COVID-19 crisis. We're asking you to tell us answer from numbers 1 to 10, with 10 saying you're absolutely, totally confident that your business is going to get through and it isn't going to be a problem. And what we're trying to do here is just really understand the confidence levels in Sutton. And what we'll be doing on a weekly basis is trying to monitor these to just sort of be able to feed back to the relevant authorities on how people are feeling. So I say just take a few moments just to be filling that one in. That would be very helpful. I've had another question that's come in as well, if I can just find it on my screen. And this is about self-employment. This is a lady, she's Maxine, she's from Mood Angles, and she says just a question regarding self-employment. She's working for herself, and she is the only member of staff. She's currently trying to deliver toddler groups and primary age swing dance classes for kids online. Great. As I'm mostly doing this by donation, she just wants to know what a self-employed sole trader has access to in terms of finance. Who is best to answer that? Debbie? Jackie. Jackie's waving at me. Over to you, Jackie.
It was only just to say that obviously we got the furloughed staff first, but then they announced the support for the self-employed. So anyone that's been self-employed in 1819 and filed a tax return, their portal gets launched in June. So that portal isn't up and running, but the lady needs to talk to her accountant, because the accountant, if she's got an accountant, will be her agent. And just like with furloughing staff, they'll be able to go on this portal. And if your income is under £50,000 a year, you get paid for March, April and May. lost money in June. So I know it's a bit later to wait than an employee, but at least the government did step in and start helping self-employed people.
Jackie, if you haven't got an accountant, which many sole traders, obviously you don't have to have an accountant, how can they can presumably go on themselves?
Yes, yeah, because they'll have their own digital tax account and they'll be able to log in and then they'll be able to make the claim themselves.
And when, if they are, this is coming live, did you say in June? When will we see the money?
We don't need the date. We don't know the date yet. It just says that portal is going to be ready in June. So I'm hoping it's early June, because this is for people who potentially haven't had any money for all of March, April and May. So they're feeling very left out at the moment, because hopefully the furloughed money will come through. Some will come through the end of this month, and the self-employed are having to wait another potentially 6 weeks after that.
So over to Debbie then, in terms of what you should do if you are financially struggling, and how you might be able to get some help from your bank.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is to give your bank manager a call and obviously tell them what your situation is and discuss it with them. I mean, it may be that they can grant you a temporary overdraft on your account until the money comes through from the government. The kind of information they'd need to know is obviously what you're applying for. So, you know, what you're expecting to come back from the government, and that the application has actually been submitted. And if they can see that, then we would look favourably at advancing that money until the money comes back from the government, you know, obviously to tide you over until that time. Obviously depends on how much you're looking for. I mean, there's also the loan, the CBILS loan, which is open to sole traders as well, but that's a minimum of 5,000. So it depends, you know, it depends on the amount. If it's smaller than that, I would say you need to probably look for an overdraft, or if it's larger, then apply for a CBILS loan, because they're interest free for the first year. So you won't have to pay any interest or any fees on it.
But generally speaking, most sort of banks and financial institutions are being quite helpful and generous in terms of making sure that... Especially in terms of wages, because we all know that people have got to be paid, and if businesses want to retain their staff and you know, to be able to pay them and then get the money back from the furlough scheme. You know, they obviously have to pay it out first. So we are being very supportive, especially in respect of wages. Great. Okay. Now I've got a question coming in from one of our attendees who's got his hand up. I'd like to invite David Guy to talk. David, you've got a question for us. Hang on, I'm going to unmute you. There you go. Can you hear us? Julie, can you help to unmute? Or does David need to unmute himself? Good. Okay, David.
Have you got me?
Now. Yes.
Yeah, no, actually, funny enough, I didn't have a question, but I've just thought of one.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. As I've got NatWest in front of me, we bank with NatWest, and there were several hurdles to jump through, which we have jumped. The application having gone in, what sort of timescale do you think for the CBILS application is approved? You know, again, assuming that all the information is with NatWest at the moment.
So has your bank manager confirmed that they've got everything that they need?
They have, yeah.
Okay, so from the time that they've got everything they need, that will then be analysed by your manager, and then that will go up to our credit team just for sign off. But we're usually saying from everything, when we've got all the information, it's about 10 days until you should get the money into your account. But what I would say is obviously speak to your bank manager, because you know, a lot of us have got between 100, 150 clients, and if they suddenly get 10 applications on the same day, you know, they do take about six hours each to actually analyse. So there may be a slight delay depending on how many, you know, applications that particular person has got in a day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Well, that's pretty good. And just also, anybody had any experience with? I know it's early doors. Furloughs only came online yesterday, but anybody got any experience? Any other businesses or anybody on the panel with any response times on furloughs at the moment?
I'm going to suggest that Helen, you might be best, and maybe Jackie as well might want to come in. Has it been smooth running? Went live yesterday. I think there were some reports I saw on the news last night. Million businesses have already accessed it.
Yeah, it's reported to be very, very successful, but I don't think it was been without its teething problems. I think Jackie will, I'm sure, come in and confirm, but I think the best advice is to make sure you look at what you need, gather all your information before you go onto the portal, and then have that all to hand, because you can't save the information. You have to input it all in one go. And somebody, I don't know if this is true, but somebody said you get about 30 minutes before it just times you out. So there was some talk of the term was being used as throttling the system. So they were monitoring how many people were going in. Obviously, it was so popular yesterday that everybody wanted to get their information in as soon as possible to make sure it works and make sure that they got theirs in first and make sure they get their money. So hopefully, as time goes on, it will even out a little bit. But I think gather all your information as much as you can. You should be able to work out what you need if you're doing it yourself. And then obviously talk to your accountant if your accountant's going to be posting those things for you. And Jackie, you probably have more first-hand experience than me.
Yeah, well, you've given excellent advice, Helen, because the point is, if you get a question wrong and then you go back to try and correct it, it throws you out. So there's a checklist, so follow the checklist, make sure you've got your UTR number, your company registration number, you've got all your numbers, all your national insurance numbers. There's some fantastic spreadsheets out there, and if anyone wants a spreadsheet, email me afterwards and I can send you one for free, where you can self-populate everything, and then you've got everything in front of you, and then you go through the portal. So far, we haven't been chucked out, and we are running through hundreds of portal requests at the moment. So touch wood, it hasn't bombed out, and we're hoping for payments 3 to 5 working days.
So that was the question actually that's come in from Satara from One Tech Gadgets, who's basically saying when will they get the 80% of salary?
It's supposed to be 3 to 5 working days after entering the information on the portal.
So in theory, those people who are expecting to have to pay their April payroll imminently as we approach the end of the month, in theory, they should be seeing that money in their accounts to enable them to do that, unless of course they're paying weekly, in which case there probably is a little bit of a backlog.
Yeah.
But no, that sounds positive. I think we were all sort of holding our breath a bit, weren't we, to see exactly what this portal would be like and how effective it would be. But it sounds like it's doing the trick, and your offer of that spreadsheet sounds fantastic. I think everybody needs to have one, so maybe we could circulate that. I've had somebody else raise their hand from the participants. Ruth Noah, are you with us, and do you want to raise a question? I'm just going to see if I can unmute you, but I think you might have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Ruth. Hi.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi. I'm from Noah's Health Foods in Wallington. A couple of questions on furloughing. We are still open, but 2 of my staff I've had to furlough. My bookkeeper, she's over 80, and so has to self-isolate. And then I have somebody else who's, and she's regularly works once a week. And then another staff member who's on 0 hours, but he was due to work a couple of times, which I've put on RTI, and I've continued to pay Sylvia. Initially, I was told that I can't furlough them, but the new guide, well, I think with the updates, and I'm speaking to the tax office, it sounds like that I can now furlough them. The question is, we do pay weekly, and I've been paying weekly, is what information do you need? What information do I need to provide? And is the furlough payment, do you get it over several weeks, so because it's covering a 3-month period, or is it as one payment? Can someone give me a bit of advice on that, please?
Jackie, over to you.
Well, I'll let Helen answer after me, but basically to furlough someone, the minimum period is 3 weeks. So you have to furlough someone for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, you can't furlough for a week and then bring them back for a week and then furlough for another week. and it's all done on RTI, which means because it's a 3-week period, you're furloughing them basically every month when you run your RTI. So it's a monthly claim, and then once you've made the claim, we hope the money will be in your account within 3 to 5 working days. So, but Helen needs to really give you some advice.
Yeah, I'm a weekly. We pay weekly. So how does that work?
Yeah, Helen's going to help you here, but you can't furlough someone for a week. It's a minimum of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Helen, do you want to step in?
Yes. So Ruth, you understand the 3-week minimum period, and after that you can bring somebody back from furlough leave and put them back on if you want to, or you can rota people in and out if you need to. That might be useful if you've got a bookkeeper who's doing timed events for you. So if you need her to do something at the end of the month, you might be able to time it if you had 3 weeks on furlough and then brought her back for a week and then put her on furlough again. But I think you also mentioned that she's over 80 and possibly shielding.
Yes. So yeah. And that was initially, my accountant said we couldn't furlough, but now we can. So she's been off, what was it, a month now?
Yes. Yeah, so you can furlough her if she's shielding, but unless she could work from home. So if she could work from home, then that would be fine. You wouldn't have to furlough her if you've got.
I'm actually having to do all her work. So yeah, at work.
And you want to do that to save money?
No, because things like RTI need to be done in the shop. We can't. She hasn't got the capacity at home. She hasn't got the technology at home.
Okay.
And then it's invoices, and it's also So I've been.
Okay, so she can't. She can't.
All extra workloads.
Yeah, I know. And so then I think your next question was around what information you need to put into the portal and when. So I've just copied and I'll paste into the somewhere on the question and answers the information that you need to provide to put into the portal. And it's my understanding, and I'll ask Jackie to confirm I'm correct, that if it's a weekly pay, you can submit a weekly. You can claim on a weekly basis if you need to. So you can make one claim per pay period, is my understanding. So if you do monthly pay, it would be once in the month. If it's weekly pay, it's once in the week. So you can, if you want to, when you've caught up, you can put one claim in for the amount so far, and then when you've caught up next week, you can put another claim in, and the week after you can put another claim in when you run your RTI.
Okay. And is it through RTI that we're doing that, or I go into that separate portal, isn't it?
There's a separate portal. I'll copy and paste some information into the. I think I put it in the question and answer section. Catherine, is that right?
Get it up. Yeah.
Or we'll make sure we get some information sent round. But there's a link to a special portal that you'll need to go into.
Okay, we'll make sure we circulate that. Thanks very much, Ruth. Hope that's helpful. We've had a question in from Maxine, which I'm just going to ask Councillor Jane McCoy to pick up on. She's asking if the council tax holiday is to be paid back later. So is it a grant or is it just a deferment? Jane, are you able to? I'm just going to unmute you. There we go.
Yes, the payment holiday is just a deferment. And I believe that the remaining payments can be spread over the sort of remainder of the year. So it is a sort of a cash flow issue. But I did mention that you might want to check whether she's eligible for a council tax reduction, in which case that will be a permanent reduction, not just a holiday.
And she would do that through going through to the council's helpline?
Yes. Council tax. I mean, yeah.
Well, we'll take that one offline. And give her. Perhaps we could get back to with a direct answer on that. We have just launched our next survey, and this is asking which of the economic interventions announced by the government will you be using. So it's multiple choice. We just want to know from you all exactly what you're actually applying for, whether it be the job retention scheme, statutory sick pay rebate, access to the loan scheme, the HMRC's time to pay scheme, or any other financial assistance for employers. And that brings me on, I think, to another question that's come in, which is regarding the loan scheme. And this person has said that they contacted Barclays and they were told that any business with turnover less than 100k does not qualify for the scheme, as the main amount is over 25k. What small businesses with turnover less than 100? What are small businesses with a turnover less than 100k supposed to do? Is that right, Debbie?
No. I don't think there's any minimum turnover for businesses. There is a maximum turnover of 45 million to be able to access the scheme, and the smallest loan that you can have on the scheme is 5,000, not 25,000. So they should be able to look at a loan as long as it's over 5,000. And also, obviously, can't speak for Barclays, but we're also doing for the smaller businesses fee-free overdrafts up to £5,000 for like the much smaller businesses. But no, you can 5,000 is the minimum, not 25.
Okay, well that's important. So hopefully that will help. You can go back to Barclays, and maybe if they don't still give you the answer you want, you can look elsewhere. Talk to Debbie, and she might well be able to help. I think just picking up on the point that was made about the council tax holiday and whether or not it was due to be paid back later. Jackie, I guess from an accountancy point of view, the thing that you would want to stress is that many of these schemes, it's not that you're being given money for nothing. Eventually, all this money that's being deferred will be due. And that, I guess, brings us on to, the fact that at some point we are going to come out the other side of this, and we all need to have businesses that are fit and able to manage the ongoing costs of running a business, which could be greater than before you went into this scenario. So what would you say about that?
So going back to my cash flow forecasting as well, it's not just the next 3 to 6 months. We've got to be thinking about the debt that we're building up for next year. So there's been some great initiatives out there, but obviously the rent and the rates is just a deferral. VAT, we don't have to pay any VAT for March, April, May and June. That will be due by next March 2021. So it's looking forward to next year to make sure you're making the right decisions now to protect your business and make sure you're viable next year. We've all been had our July tax payments postponed as well. But again, that's all going to be due next January. So we need to take account of that. And then a number of my clients have postponed 1, 2, 3 months PAYE. But again, we will be able to get time to pay, but you need to factor in, you might get 6 months, you might get 12 months if you're lucky, but I would err on caution and assume you're going to be paying that back over 6 months. So now is such an important time to get to grips with your numbers, and being honest, you've got to make the right decisions now to protect your business, and that's where Helen comes in and taking good HR advice now, because you can't let your heart rule your head, unfortunately. We're all running businesses, and you've got to make the right decision for the benefit of yourself, your businesses and the rest of your staff.
I think looking at that long-term option, many businesses are running their accounting periods from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. I guess we could all be a bit guilty at times of just being in the moment and looking at our current year. But actually now more than ever, we need to be thinking now about next year and what that will look like, particularly if our businesses will have to change fundamentally in terms of the services that the businesses are able to offer. We don't know how long social distancing is going to continue, in what form. It could go on for a lot longer in some form or other. So actually looking ahead, is there anything, Helen, from an HR point of view, you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously very important to forward plan, and I think you can start doing that now. Many businesses will know that or have a very strong feeling about how likely they are going to be able to bring everybody back to work at the end of the scheme, or in any way, shape or form in the near future, in the next month or 2 months even. So think about the makeup of your staff, and think about the length of service that they've had. So if people are approaching 2 years service, that's the time at which they acquire full employment rights, which means it's much more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult, more lengthy to unfortunately dismiss them. It's easier to do that before they reach that 2-year mark. I'm not suggesting that we have to go and get rid of everybody that's been working with us for short periods of time, but if you do need to lose employees, that would be the safest place to look first, unfortunately, for those people. And also think about notice periods that people have in their contracts. If people have been working with you for more than 12 years, then they will have 12 weeks notice. So that's a liability that you've got to factor in if you are going to make any redundancies, and then you've got redundancy pay. So start thinking about those things now, and the lead time you need in which to consult with those employees, and then give them notice if you are unfortunately going to make them redundant. As Jackie said, it's very difficult. You have to make some very tough decisions, and you have to make them with your head and not your heart. It's a really, really horrible time. I understand that.
Can I just ask you something, which I know it has happened? I'm sorry, we just have launched another poll, and this is looking at what you would like to know more about in the forthcoming webinars that Successful Sutton are hosting. So we're just asking you to tell us what your concerns are, so that with Patricia and Nick, we can pull together panels in the future. And obviously, if there are other subjects that you want to talk about, then please do message us on the chat, and we can make sure that we're picking those up. So that is a poll that's currently in progress. And then I just wanted to come back to you to talk about holiday while people are furloughed. Obviously, we're in a nice sunny time of year. Before the end of June, no doubt there will be many people that would normally, under normal circumstances, have chosen to take holiday. What is the situation for that if you're an employer at the moment? How do you handle that?
So we've received some clarity on that, which was it felt like it was long awaited. Somebody said earlier that it's only been about 3 or 4 weeks, but it feels like 3 or 4 months to us all, I know. So we have had some clarity, and you are able to ask your employees to take annual leave whilst they're on furlough, and that would not break the furlough position. You will need to think about the payments. So if you've got enough cash to pay them to top up that extra 20% or over and above the 2,500 cap, then you'll need to think about how you're going to pay them that. So if you have enough money to do that, you might want to think about asking them to take some holiday. You should normally ask them, give them twice the amount of notice for the amount of leave that you want them to take. So if you want them to take a week, you should give them 2 weeks notice. There's plenty of time to do that. We've got the furlough scheme open until the end of June. There's plenty of time to start giving some notice. Employees are allowed this year only to carry over some of their annual leave to next year. Normally, you're not allowed to do that within the working time directive, the 5.6 weeks that we're entitled to as a minimum. So holidays can be carried over to next year, which is a new piece of emergency legislation that was passed, which is helpful in terms of spreading it out. But obviously, there's still some sort of cost to people coming back off furlough and then wanting to take annual leave. So that's another way to manage your finances if you're able to top up that extra above the 80% or the 2,500, is to start planning some holidays that you would request your staff to take. Not ideal because there's not much to do at the moment. People can't go and visit places they wanted to visit and the people they wanted to visit. But most employees, I think, are understanding that this is a situation that they need to help in. And actually, some people are pleased to be receiving a top up to their pay during a difficult time.
But just to be clear, if someone takes holiday as the employer, you have to top up to 100%.
Yes,
so
you would need
the first thing that you have to do. That's not a choice. You have to then pay people 100%.
It's not a choice for the amount of holiday that you're entitled to under the working time directive, which is the 20 days plus the additional 8 days bank holidays. If you have additional contractual annual leave, you can agree with your employee to pay them less if you want to.
Okay.
If they want to agree.
And do they have to take it? So if, as an employer, you say, I really do need you to take some holiday before the 30th of June, do they have to take it?
So normally, in normal circumstances, any employer can give notice to any employee to take holiday when they wish them to take it, as long as they give the twice the amount of notice. There is a small discrepancy in the legislation and the guidance that's been given that is a little bit unclear. but it's a common view amongst solicitors and people who've looked into the legislation and the guidance that yes, the employee would have to take that leave. I think we don't need to resort to the have to, because I think if you talk to your employees and say, I'd like you to take the leave, please, and this is what I'm going to do, I think most employees, not all I know, but most employees are likely to agree to that, because they're wanting to, ensure that they've got a better chance of a job to go back to at the end, and they understand that times are very difficult. So I think we don't have to rely on the law. We can rely on goodwill and good communications to make that happen.
So I guess that the key to this is the fact that there's a mixture of things here. There's first of all thinking about your business in terms of what amount of holiday might be sensible to get people to take before the end of June, then looking ahead to the end of the year. If everyone then took all their holiday in that period, how is that going to affect the business? And then thinking more long term about what amount of holiday you're going to allow them to take over, or under the new directive they're allowed to take that over, and how is that going to affect the business?
Absolutely.
Sort of a bit of a jigsaw sort of thing to work out here, isn't there, in terms of what's best? And then one other question which came up this morning on a webinar we ran, which was around bank holidays. And we've got 2 bank holidays coming up in May. How does that work in terms of topping up or not?
So the same thing, bank holidays are just like any other holiday. It's just that those of us who work a kind of Monday to Friday job kind of just don't really see the bank holidays as being part of our holiday entitlement, but they're just the same. So again, give your employees notice that it's a bank holiday coming up, they know that anyway, and that they'll be on holiday as normal, providing you're able to pay that top up above the 80% or the 2,500.
Okay, so what you're saying is that as employers, we need to be aware that if we are not expecting people to work on those bank holidays, which I guess is the same as the Easter 4-day weekend we just had, then do we actually owe our employees some money because they've actually taken a day's holiday, which we then have to top them up?
I think we possibly would do, but I think those sorts of things, I think we can iron out a little bit later down the line. I think the most important thing that people are doing at the moment is making sure they've got the right people put on furlough leave, then they're getting the right information into the HMRC portal, and then I think we've got next month to kind of deal with all those anomalies and work all those things out, because everybody's frantically working away to get the main bits sorted.
Yeah.
So I'd say
don't be aware of that at some point they're going to have to sit down and think about that as part of all of that, which maybe hasn't crossed everybody's minds at the moment. I've had a question that's come in from somebody who's on the Kimpton trading estate, where JLL are managing or owning a lot of the space there. They are the landlords, and they're asking, are we aware of there being any rent relief help coming through some of these large landlords? I think the simple answer is no, we're not aware of anything. But Jackie, have you got any experience of that from any of the clients that you're dealing with in terms of rent reliefs?
To be honest, all I've had experience of is landlords letting people off for 3 months and letting them build up the arrears.
Yeah.
So that's your friendly landlords who, if they've got mortgages, obviously they can defer their mortgages for 3 months. So they're not paying their mortgage, and then they're not receiving the rent. But obviously there'll be a lot of landlords out there who haven't got mortgages, and they're relying on that income as their own income. So they're probably not going to be so keen in letting people have rent holidays.
Yeah. I mean, we have had a little bit of experience of this on some other webinars that we've run. And I think that the answer is to talk to your landlord. There isn't any, certainly the large landlords like the JLLs and the Avivas, who are just going to make a uniform statement across their huge portfolios that they are going to do anything en masse. But I think, actually talking individually and explaining your own situation, and as Jackie says, coming to an arrangement whereby you get a deferment and then you agree a payback. There isn't any landlord, I think, that would not want to be helpful in that respect. And in the long run, that's going to protect their rent long term. Otherwise, the business is going to go under and they're going to lose that tenant altogether. So I think that sort of sensible approach. But I know on Kimpton, you do have a bid. You've got the Kipper bid down on the Kimpton Industrial Estate. And maybe there's something there that the bid could be lobbying for on behalf of their tenants collectively to see whether anything can be, helped in that way. I don't know whether anyone else has got any experience of that particular question that they can add more. Okay, so I'm just looking at what other questions we've got in. I'm going to go to Patricia, and I just want to talk about the sort of high street generally within your business improvement district. Obviously, you've got a big high street made up of lots of national and local businesses, and I know you've got some thoughts coming forward on how you want to encourage residents to support particularly local independents a bit more. Is there something just say on that for me?
Yeah, so what we're looking to do, hopefully, is we're pulling together a group of our independent businesses just to kind of kickstart everything. What we're trying to do is get a message out to all of the residents really as to how they can support their local businesses. So doing things like following people online, recommending, going onto social media, and also buying things in advance if people have an online offer. But looking at things like gift voucher schemes and that kind of thing, just to keep everybody kind of engaged with those particular independent companies, because obviously they're not visible anymore. We're not going to be able to go down the high street and see them as we normally do. So it's how you can keep engaging with that. And I know a lot of the residents, particularly in Sutton, are quite keen to do that. So we're looking to kind of pull together a platform that enable them to do it and share it a bit wider over social media and do a bit of marketing and communications around that as well. So got a few independents that are quite keen to sign up to that already. And we're putting another message out for that next week to get everybody else on board to see who wants to participate in that. But it should be quite a good scheme, and I think it'll work quite well.
I think one of the things that has come out of this whole situation is the amount of loyalty there is within local communities to support each other and work collaboratively and collectively. I know that the Mayor of London yesterday announced a Pay It Forward campaign, which I know, Trish, you're going to look at. That's actually a really nice way of thinking. Actually, I need my haircut. My usual hairdresser is shut, but it would be helpful if I paid that business forward and bought a voucher to say, yes, as soon as I'm ready, I am going to come and have that haircut. So let me pay you in advance. That helps their cash flow. It gives them some money now. And that whole scheme was launched yesterday. And I think, Patricia, we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail next week. But if any business out there wants to have a look at that, it's the Pay It Forward website. It's a crowdfunding appeal, which you just go on. It doesn't cost anything to do. You create your own rewards, and then local people can try and support their local shops. So that's quite a nice initiative. Jane, I just wanted you to bring you in on that sort of community element. I'm not sure, have you got sound at the moment, or have we got... I'm just trying to unmute you. Julie, is it possible to unmute Jane, or have we lost her sound? Oh, there we go. Jane, I just want to ask you on the community angle. Obviously, loads of opportunities to support the wider community in Sutton through volunteering. Many charities, I'm sure, are have requirements and needs, and I'm assuming that's something which within the council you're coordinating to a degree.
Yes, we're lucky that we've always had good partnership working with the voluntary sector community, and so in response to the government's request that we're doing the delivery of the food parcels, and also making sure that anyone that needs sort of additional support, whether it's personal health care, getting help discharged out of hospitals, it's all part and parcel of what the council has to do, and we work with our partners to deliver that. So the hub we've got going on is a joint piece of work with the voluntary sector partners, but then it's been extended even more into the community. There's local sort of schemes that are part of that going on, just so that it's localised. So you can deal with, people can deal with a few streets in their area, but it's all centrally coordinated. But the pulling together and the willingness of people to get involved has just been staggering. I mean, we always knew that certain people were particularly good at that, but in the case of a crisis like this, to see it coming together, it's been fantastic. So a big, huge thank you to everybody that has been involved. Businesses have been getting involved. Businesses have been stepping up in many ways, and we're actually sort of keeping on top of things here in Sutton, and getting fantastic feedback from those that are benefiting from it. So I think that it just demonstrates it's all of us working together so well.
That's great, and I think also many of us have got furloughed staff who are pretty bored. at home, and a number of ways that they can help their sort of health and well-being by volunteering for some of these opportunities and just getting involved and getting themselves, keeping themselves active, which is such an important part of our employees' health and well-being. We need them to remain as active as they can, so when the time's right, they're fit and healthy to come back and serve us again in our businesses. I'm conscious that we're drawing to the end of our time, so I just want to ask each of you to just maybe sum up what you think following sort of this hour's discussion. If there's something in particular maybe that you've forgotten that you think you need to add, or anything else that you'd like to add. Can I start with you, Jackie? Final words from you.
Well, one of my key learnings, as I'm not young anymore, was we all need to embrace technology. So working from home, using a laptop, doing Zoom calls, using Team 365 to keep in contact with your staff. If anyone thought that their business didn't need digitalisation or IT, we've now harshly learned that that is not true. So we need that. My only other message is keep communicating, which I think is what you've already said, but talk to your customers, talk to your suppliers. You know, people are being very understanding. We don't want to bury our heads in the sand because we don't want our customers not to pay us. So if they can't pay us and they're frightened to make contact, it's up to us to make contact and then agree a payment plan. So just keep communicating with your customers, your suppliers and your staff, and find ways of keeping in touch. And I think Team 365 and Zoom is an excellent way of keeping in touch with your staff, because it's very lonely working from home. And I miss my staff and I miss my clients and I miss that face-to-face interaction. So I've learned how to use all these gadgets now.
That's right, and I would second that. And I think, it's taught us all that we maybe don't need to be jumping on enough public transport to commute to meetings with clients. Actually, you can just as efficiently, far more efficiently and cost effectively carry out these meetings via these platforms. So there's definitely something there, I think, that moving forward, all of our businesses will benefit from. Helen, from an HR perspective, where do you begin? I'm sure ongoing requirements, but tell us what your final thoughts are.
Yeah, so to echo what Jackie says about, and think about your business, think about the planning, what it's going to look like the other side, and deal with those issues. Start planning when you want to start talking to staff, when you need to start talking to staff, and making those plans. And to echo the well-being things, we need to do that all for ourselves as well. We need to make sure we're taking breaks. It's very easy to be sat at home in front of your laptop, whether it's sitting at your desk or in front of the TV or whatever it is you're doing. We should have start and finish times. I need to take my own medicine, I know, but we should do that, and we should be encouraging our staff that are working from home to do that as well, because our staff are working so hard too. And then the furloughed people, keep communicating with them, find ways in which to communicate and come together as a team. It's absolutely fine to keep in touch. They're not allowed to work, but it's fine to keep in touch and attend online social events and things like that. And yeah, just look after our own well-being is the main message.
That's great, thank you. Debbie, final thoughts from you?
Hi, I want to echo the communication. That's really, really important. And also in respect of communicating with your bank as well, because unless we know what you want, we can't help you. And, we're very, very open to having conversations just to find out what kind of facilities you need and how to put it together. And then in terms of finance, I think spending time looking at your number and your cash flow to actually work out what exactly you need, because it's better to spend some time now rather than trying to apply for too much and it getting rejected, or not applying for enough so that then you have to go back again, or you haven't got enough to survive. So again, communication and spending time now to actually look at what you need. And just speak to your bank, because we want to help you in any way we can.
That's great, lovely, thank you. Jane, from the council's point of view, still on a long journey to support people. What's your final words on the subject today?
Well, as we've seen, there's plenty of schemes out there, but they're not always easy to navigate. Do feed that back to me, both council and the government schemes. We have been, some of these things are not unfamiliar. Accessing the loans is a bit complicated. The payroll, job retention scheme, or everybody going on at one time. So these are things that need to be fed back, because it's learning and to go on. But one thing I perhaps would like to ask people to think about is, when we come out of this, do we go back to business as usual, or do we try and do things a bit differently? You know, it's been a great opportunity to give us a bit of time to think about, we can do things differently. Should we do them differently? There's all sorts of aspects, but I think that would be, you know, we need the ideas to come from particularly from businesses in that area about how we might, you know, do things better going forward, having learnt from this terrible time.
I think that's right. I think we need to take some positives from this situation and look at how we can turn those to help us moving forward. Nick, I'm going to come to you. You've been very patient as chair of the bid. I know you were very keen to understand some of the issues that were out there from the bid's perspective. Thoughts from you?
Well, I think I'll leave the bid's perspective to one side because it's a small company and it can look after itself reasonably well. Dare I say, touch wood. I do have two comments I'd like to throw in. One is about pay it forward, which I think is excellent in principle. And I've heard, for example, that some, at least, of the airlines are offering ridiculously low prices for transatlantic flights with the facility to pick dates anytime in the first 12 months after they open the skies again. Sounds very attractive, but with all pay it forward schemes, apart from the one run at Tatzer Coffee, the best independent coffee shop in the high street, you have to run the risk of solvency, don't you? You know, if you are being asked to put £500 behind the bar, effectively, of your favourite pub or restaurant, in the expectation that in some months' time you'll be able to get a discount, or the chef may come to cook at your house for you. In the current circumstances, and some businesses are more vulnerable than others, obviously, there's a huge risk you're going to lose all that money. Having said that, we will be making an offer at Tatzer whereby people can pay £100 and have as many coffees as they want on a single day.
Great.
Another question hasn't come up really, and maybe this is one for Jane/government, but there's this gap at the moment in the financial support schemes in the case of very small companies like IR35 companies, one-man companies, if you will, where the proprietor probably regards him or herself as self-employed, but not entitled to participate in the self-employed scheme as we currently understand it, because it's a company. And that person probably wouldn't furlough him or herself because he or she needs to carry on working. And because most of the income of those people will be taken out of the company in form of dividends, a nice little tax shelter, it looks like the Chancellor is going to exclude such companies from any benefit under this. And I say a big boo-hoo to that.
Jackie, I can see you gesticulating. Have you anything else?
Well, to be honest with you, as an accountant, you know, we get a huge advantage by having dividends, and you know they're charged at a lower tax rate. So to be fair, we've already had that advantage. So why should we have any further advantage from the government? But if you're going to be on a minimum salary, I understand that, and most people in IR35 companies are paying themselves £12,000 a year. You can still carry out your statutory duties, as Helen will confirm, and make sure you're filing your accounts and meeting all your directors' obligations, but you can furlough yourself. So some of my clients in that position, they have no work at all, and they have no income and no prospect of any income. So as long as they've told me they're not going to be doing any work or contacting clients or marketing themselves, they have furloughed themselves, and you know, they'll start working again after June.
Right. I'm sure there's many more questions. I'm going to give the last word today to Patricia, who is the person at the coalface, keeping the bid going, working really, really hard. But just before I do that, very generously, Sitara from One Tech Gadgets has put into the question that if anyone needs help with IT or using their device applications like Zoom, please feel free to contact him. His business will be very happy to offer support remotely on the phone or on the internet, and that's a very generous offer. I know there's many people out there like Jackie and like me that we're not the most IT savvy, and this is a huge learning curve. And I know there's a lot of more elderly people, dare I say it, than myself, that also are having to come to terms with how they communicate with their families in a different way. So I hope you're not too inundated, Satara, but what we will do is we will put that, Julie, if you could perhaps copy and paste that post into the chat so that everyone who's on it can pick up that email address. That would be really helpful. So I'm going to give the last few words to Patricia. We are back here again on Thursday. These webinars are taking place twice a week for Sutton, from 2 to 3 p.m. on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And we have this Thursday's subject already decided. Patricia, do you want to just tell everyone a bit about that?
I will. Just to say thank you to all of our panelists today. It's been great. I think it's been really interesting, and a lot of stuff's been covered that I know that a lot of the businesses have wanted to know. So thank you for that. So yeah, the next webinar is on Thursday. That's focusing a lot around security on the high street. As a lot of you may know, we have our bid support officer, Rupert, who is regularly patrolling at the moment and going and supporting businesses. Crime is pretty low, thankfully. For the most part, a lot of Sutton residents have actually just been following instruction and doing their social distancing and keeping themselves to themselves. So I suppose a byproduct of everyone being at home is that the crime rate has actually reduced quite significantly, which is a bonus. However, there are a lot of premises that are closed. So the session on Thursday is really to listen to some of the experts explain what the best thing is to do with premises, particularly if you're an independent business, how best to secure that over this time, and how to manage that properly and effectively, and also do a checklist for yourselves as well. So if you have closed down, what have you switched off? What have you left on? What have you left signage? Where have you left stuff in the front window? All these little things that we tend not to think about when we're kind of busy worrying about the wider picture could come back to be a bit of a problem. So Thursday's going to be quite good. We have quite a good, strong panel for that one as well. So yeah, and I suppose the other thing for me is just to make sure that everyone is aware that any questions you have, particularly if you are in the district or not, and you just want to find out a little bit more from somebody maybe in the council, or maybe you're trying to access certain information and don't know the best place to go to, then please just drop me a line. We are quite good as a resource with pointing you in the right direction and getting the information that you might need. So please just let me know if you need anything at all. But thank you.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to say about Thursday's session, if you're a business and you're not on the high street and you think that security is not an issue for you, we do have somebody from the police cyber centre coming onto the panel, and I've heard him speak on other panels, and it is quite useful to know what we should all be doing about cyber security at this time when we're all using more internet-based technology. There's a huge amount of important information that he can share with you all. So don't think my business isn't on the high street, Thursday isn't for me. There's a lot more to keeping your business secure than just locking up your frontages of your shop. So I'd encourage everybody to join us again on Thursday between 2 and 3. So thank you again to all of our panelists for giving up your time, for so generously offering to help and support businesses. It is a collective. We are all in this together. So thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you all hopefully on Thursday. And in the meantime, please stay safe and stay well. Thanks very much. Goodbye.